Welcome to this presentation on how to ace all your tests in college. Before we get started, here are a few things to think about. Anytime you tackle a new topic, chapter, lesson, or study session, it's important to take a minute or two to tune in to some basic questions. This helps set the mental stage and prepare your mind for what's coming up. When you open your mind to new topics by posing some basic questions, it will give your study sessions focus. Let's start out by taking a few minutes to think about how much time you need to commit to studying in preparation for tests. In high school, about 80% of what you needed to learn came from your teacher, and about 20% from your own work outside of class. In college, the opposite is true. You will only receive a small portion of what you need to learn from your teacher, and the majority of the material you need to cover will be on your own, studying independently by reading assignments, doing practice exercises, reviewing, and using other active study techniques that we'll be talking about later in this presentation. When you were in high school, how much time did you spend per week studying? If you said 1 to 3 hours, then you were pretty much like most high school students. Well, in college, you should plan on spending about 2 to 3 hours studying independently for each hour that you spend in class. One 3-credit-hour class requires 3 hours per week of class time, and therefore 4 to 6 hours of study time outside of class. If you're taking 12 credits, you should figure on spending 12 hours per week in class and another 24 to 36 hours studying on your own. Wow! That's quite a difference from what you're used to in high school. So that helps explain the reasoning behind this 80-20 rule. Everyone wants to be a successful student, and success may be defined differently for different students or even for different courses that you're taking. Regardless of what you consider success, the concepts presented on this slide, mastery of concepts, use of active study techniques, a realistic schedule, managing test anxiety, and employing test-taking strategies that work. These are all vital to getting the test results that you can be proud of. These are the topics that will be covered in this presentation. Exam preparation is not so much about what you do in the day or two leading up to the test. It has much more to do with implementing a well-rounded strategy that you employ on a weekly basis. You might think of it in terms of 2 stages of exam prep. Stage 1 being those activities you do on an ongoing basis throughout the semester, and Stage 2 being study and review during the week prior to exam day. First, let's talk about the ongoing process, because this is where most of test preparation takes place. One aspect of ongoing exam preparation is using the study cycle. Anytime you're beginning to learn about a new topic or concept, or starting a new unit or chapter, always begin with preparation. Never go to class cold without having exposed yourself to the new information. This will greatly reduce your chances of becoming confused during the lecture and greatly increase the chances that you can ask good questions and think about the material on a deeper level while in class. If you don't have time to read the chapter carefully, at least read the learning outcomes, the headings, the highlighted information, captions, look at the illustrations, and think about what you already know about the concepts. Next, go to class. Skipping classes puts you at a real disadvantage because class is where you'll get the most insight into what the most important topics are to learn for the subject. You'll also be exposed to opportunities to practice applying principles and thinking more deeply about the concepts through classroom discussions. When you go to class prepared, you're in a better position to use class time to take notes, gather clues about what's important, ask questions about things that were unclear to you during preparation, and participate in classroom discussion and activities. Then you'll want to review as soon as possible after class. Use your text and short-term memory to flesh out your notes and develop questions around the most significant ideas. The last part of the study cycle involves conducting 4 to 5 intense study sessions per week for each class. Once you've completed the cycle, you start it all over again for the next section of information that you need to learn. A big part of the study cycle is intense study sessions. You might want to call it the power hour. This slide shows how to allocate time during intense study sessions. Very few people can sustain concentration and be effective in studying for more than an hour at a time. Some struggle with even that amount of time. If that's the case for you, you may want to modify the power hour to a time frame that is more realistic for you. Ask yourself, what is my optimum length of time that I can sustain my concentration? And then adjust the time devoted to each step accordingly. Just be sure that you don't eliminate any of the steps. Many students don't incorporate all of these steps into their study routine. Which step do you think most students skip? If you said setting a goal, you're right. Many students skip this step. Even though it takes the least amount of time, it's the most critical step because it provides the focus for step 2, the active study step, and the step where you spend the most of your time. If you haven't defined your study goal for the session, you may find yourself finishing step 2 and not really being sure what you've learned. Has this ever happened to you? Your goal can be in the form of a question, like the first example, or a statement, like the second and third examples. And it should be phrased in terms of what you want to be able to do with the information that you're studying. Using action words to phrase your goal will ensure that you achieve this. Oftentimes you can find the study goals listed in your textbook in the form of learning outcomes at the beginning of the chapter, questions at the end of the chapter, or by reading the chapter summary. If that's not the case, you can create your own by turning chapter headings into questions or learning goals. Make sure that your study goals are more than just simple recall of facts. The best study goals are ones that require you to apply terminology, solve problems, or otherwise manipulate the information to complete a task, such as those suggested by the action words on this slide. The bulk of your time spent in the power hour entails active study techniques. All this means is that you're not just sitting there letting your eyes skim over the page while mentally making plans for the weekend. Instead, your mind is engaged with the material. So, how can you make sure you're able to maintain an appropriate level of concentration? Here are some examples of active study tasks that you can do. Which of these techniques have you used? If you regularly use 2 or 3 of these methods, you're already well on your way to making good use of your study time. Different techniques work best for different people, depending on personal learning style, as well as the subject that you're studying. Use cues from your text, your instructor, and trial and error to find out what works best for you and for the courses that you're taking. If you use several of these techniques and are still confused, then visit the Learning Center and work with the tutor. Tutors can help you be engaged with the material by asking you questions, guiding you to a clearer understanding, and verifying that you're understanding and applying the concepts correctly. Whatever active study methods you choose to employ, the intent is to maintain a high level of concentration while studying. The art of concentration, whether studying biology or playing pool, is to focus on the task at hand and eliminate distraction. We all have the ability to concentrate. Sometimes. Think of the times when you were lost in something you enjoy, a sport, playing music, a good book, a movie. Total concentration. If everyone has the ability to concentrate, why do so many of us have trouble concentrating on schoolwork? It may be because the material seems boring or irrelevant. It's difficult to understand, or we're distracted by other things. When you're finding it hard to concentrate, try to focus on those things that you can leverage some control over, such as where and when you study, varying the active study techniques you use, and planning for rewards for accomplishing your study goals. One of the active study techniques mentioned on an earlier slide is to create a mind map. Mind mapping is an active study technique that can be used by many different types of learners. It's verbal, it's visual, and the colors stimulate mental activity and help to create connections between ideas. Mind maps can capture the essence of an entire chapter on a single page, which can later be used for quick reviews of the concepts. To make a mind map, start in the center of a blank page with the main subject. Each main branch will represent one of the central ideas condensed into a single keyword or short phrase. The colored lines help you to group concepts together and show associations between ideas. Thicker lines are main ideas. Thinner lines are supporting information for those main ideas. Use highlighters, codes, abbreviations, arrows, and illustrations to keep it lively and interesting. The structure you end up with will be a radiant hierarchy, with ideas radiating out from your central theme and main branches. So now that you know how to implement Stage 1 of exam preparation, the study cycle, let's talk about Stage 2. Several weeks of Stage 1 preparation lead up to the week before the exam, at which time Stage 2 kicks in. By the time you reach this stage, the hard work is already done. You should have a pretty good handle on the material you've studied up to this point. So now it's just a matter of making sure you solidify the information in your head, you address all the logistical details, and get into the right frame of mind to do your best. Be sure to schedule 1 or 2 intensive study sessions to review the material. Also, take care of your physical needs and get as much information as you can about what to expect on the test. One of the things you want to be sure to know is what kind of test it will be, because different types of tests require different approaches. They treat concepts differently and focus on different thinking skills. Objective tests typically have pretty straightforward right and wrong answers. Essay tests, on the other hand, have more room for interpretation, analysis, and perhaps even some creativity. Whereas multiple choice type tests focus more on facts, vocabulary, details, and problem solving, essay tests require mastery of larger themes, understanding of relationships, and a deeper analysis of issues. So let's discuss how you might approach preparing for each of these kinds of tests. Since objective tests focus on detail, you need to allow your mind time to retain these details. If you try to load too much stuff into your brain on short notice, you won't be able to recall it when you need to for the test. So make sure you've allowed yourself ample time to absorb, practice, and review the information. Make sure you have a good grasp of everything that was covered in class or emphasized in your textbook, including the steps and processes, sequences of events, and terminology. When dealing with terminology, don't just focus on the definitions, but also on relationships, such as similarities and differences between the terms. Use your own words to explain concepts, as this verifies your understanding. Check your textbook for sample quizzes, exercises, and other tools to help you practice for the real test. Some textbooks have websites that have some excellent test preparation resources available for you to use. To prepare for an essay test, you first want to make sure you know the scope of what's being covered on the test, and then pull all of your study materials together. A quick review of these materials will help you identify the main themes, which can be organized onto index cards, one theme to a card. If each card has a main topic heading on it, the rest of the card can contain the significant details. Now you're ready to create some possible questions and write out responses to them. Refer back to your cards as necessary to make sure you've included all the pertinent supporting ideas. The cards and practice questions can then be carried around with you and reviewed frequently in the days leading up to the test. A realistic study schedule is always a good tool to use, but it's especially important as you plan your time in preparation for an impending exam. Try to include as much detail as possible on your study schedule, or use extra paper or note cards as necessary. Don't be afraid to experiment with the Outlook calendar accessed through your YC portal. It can be synced with your smartphone and set to give you reminders about when it's time to study. Unfortunately, sometimes our best intentions fall by the wayside and we find ourselves in a situation where a test is upon us, and for whatever reasons, we have not been able to fully implement our ongoing study cycle and stages 1 and 2 of test preparation. Because let's face it, we all know that life happens. So now what? Don't throw up your hands or throw in the towel. Take a logical and methodical approach to making the best of a bad situation. Cramming is never the preferred method of preparing for a test, But there are times as a student when things just get away from you and it can't be avoided. If this happens on a regular basis, then you probably need some help with time management. For those times when you've procrastinated or when things got away from you, when you forgot the test was tomorrow or when you were just overwhelmed with too many things to do, it will help you to have some strategies for making the most out of your cram sessions. This slide outlines a structured approach to dealing with a less than ideal situation. Because some preparation is better than no preparation, and because it's usually better to know a little about a lot than a lot about only a couple of the main concepts to be covered on the test. Since you don't have time to cover it all, start with a quick overview and make a list of the main concepts or topics. Then choose the 5 that you consider the most important. Write each of these on the top of a clean piece of paper. Then 1 page at a time, write down everything that you already know about that topic. When you're done, refer to your notes, textbook, and whatever other resources are available to add in details that you didn't include on your own. Once you've completed that for all 5 pieces of paper, put them in order from most important to least important. Now go back to your original list of concepts, choose 2 more, and repeat the process. Repeat again if time allows, but try not to exceed 9 concepts if possible. Use your sheets to review immediately before the test. Have you ever felt like this when you enter the testing room? We probably all have at one time or another. What do you think contributes most to feelings like this? Well, nothing contributes more to test anxiety than being or feeling unprepared. So if you follow the principles for study cycle and stages 1 and 2 of test preparation, these techniques will go a long way towards allaying test anxiety. If you follow all of these suggestions and still find yourself freezing up during the test, getting emotional, feeling anxious or depressed even after the test is over, or having other signs of anxiety around tests, maybe a visit with someone in the Learning Center can help you figure out how to minimize those reactions. Short of that, here are some suggestions for dealing with those feelings. As I mentioned, being well prepared is the best defense against test anxiety. It establishes your confidence and also contributes to a positive mental attitude. Think of the test as an opportunity to show how hard you've worked at learning the material, rather than a trap that your instructor has set for you. Show up well rested and avoid foods or beverages that tend to upset your stomach. Stay relaxed during the test by using deep breathing or positive mental messages. It's not a competition, so don't worry about what the other students are doing. Finally, using good test-taking strategies will contribute to reducing anxiety as well. So let's talk about some of these strategies. So what do I mean by test-taking strategies? It's simply some approaches and techniques you can employ to help you do your best. Let's start with the DETER strategy, a systematic approach to test-taking. Using such an approach will ensure that you cover all your bases and hit a home run on your next test. D is for directions, not the grade you're going to get. Don't assume you know what you're supposed to do. Make sure that you read and follow all the directions on the test. The first E means just to do a quick reconnaissance or examine the test so that you know how many questions there are, the level of difficulty, that sort of thing, so that you can move on to T, or managing the time you spend on the test. If you have 1 hour to write 4 essays, you need to give yourself 15 minutes per question. If you spend 30 minutes on the first question, you won't be able to do the rest of the test justice. You also want to make sure you know which sections of the test are worth the most points and give those sections a little more time than the others. Also, be sure to allot some time at the end for reviewing. The second E means that you make sure to answer the easiest questions first. This does 2 things. First, it helps to ensure that you don't run out of time and not have a chance to answer questions that you know you will get correct. Have you ever had to turn in an unfinished test only to find out that there were questions you knew the answers to but didn't have time to complete? The other reason you want to answer the easiest questions first is that it gets your brain clicking and the juices flowing. your mind will kick in and start recalling related ideas. The last thing you want to do is review the test once you've finished. Sometimes we make errors because we're rushing or nervous, so this gives you a chance to correct them. Also, sometimes you find answers in the test, and going back over it will make sure you can use the information you've gleaned from other questions to verify your responses. A lot of students cringe at the thought of writing essays, but in many ways, they're a much better way of assessing what you've learned. If you used mind maps to help you prepare for the exam, you can now try to recreate a map to help you answer the question. The main thing is to spend a little time organizing your thoughts before you start writing. You and your instructor will be glad that you did. Begin your essay with a thesis statement that is a concise and direct answer to the question. Then go from there with your supporting details or arguments. Stick to the points on your mind map and don't try to pad your answer with extra fluff to make it look like you know more than you really do. Believe me, instructors see through that. They know what they're looking for, and irrelevant stuff thrown in to take up space on the page is not it. Be sure to leave a few moments to go back and proofread your answers, especially if you're writing on a computer. Spell checker can sometimes be your enemy by replacing words with the wrong ones and conveying the wrong idea. When taking a multiple choice test, be a two-handed test taker by covering the answer with one hand while reading the question and trying to come up with the answer in your head first. If you don't find the answer you're looking for, then use some of these strategies. Marking keywords or crossing out extraneous words that lead to confusion, eliminating wrong answers, and reading all the available options before selecting one, because you're always looking for the best answer. Don't keep changing your answer. Usually your first choice is the right one, unless you misread the question or found an answer somewhere else on the test. If there's no guessing penalty, always take an educated guess. Educated guessing just means, rather than taking a stab in the dark, consider these principles. Look for choices stated in positives and with more information that provides a thorough answer. Sometimes the most general or middle-of-the-road answer is the best one. If two answers are very similar, the correct one is probably not one of them. If two answers are opposite, there's a good chance that one of those is correct. Try to construct grammatically correct sentences with your answer choices. Seek familiarity and use common sense. Answers that contain words that don't allow for exceptions, known as absolutes, are usually to be avoided. These principles are not foolproof, but at least you can improve your odds in the guessing game so that you don't look like a complete fool. What happens when you've used all these techniques and find that more than one answer seems correct? Remember, you're looking for the best answer. So, everything else being equal, which one is the best? Read through the question and answer using both options and see which one makes the best answer. So let's practice. Here's a sample question from a cultural geography test. Even if you've never taken such a class, you should be able to use some of these strategies we just talked about to figure out the correct answer. A, B, and C are obviously common uses. Eliminate them immediately because we want the least important. Congratulations! You just improved your chances from 20% to 50%. Approach the remaining choices using logic. If livestock provide three important things, A, B, and C, then they must give their owners personal status. That leaves you with E, a rather limited use of livestock, since there are other materials that are more effective for creating shelter. See? A little logic helps figure it out. Let's try another. Well, these are obviously nonsense words, so I'm pretty sure you didn't already know the answer. But by reading each choice into the sentence, you should have chosen B, since it's the only one that creates agreement between article and noun. Okay, next. If you chose A, congratulations. The question asks for causes, plural, and A is the only answer that provides more than one cause. How about the next one? This one's a little trickier, but if you paid attention to the first example on this slide, you know that IGNU was linked to Friggle-Bregg, so you can now use that knowledge to help you answer this question. B is the correct answer. Here's another. You can first eliminate A and B because of the word only, an absolute that we want to try to avoid in choosing answers. If you understand the words commonly used in essay questions, then you should have chosen C, since compare means to show similarities and differences. Here's one that has a lot of words. Which words might you circle as keywords and which ones might you cross out to help you simplify the question? Which answer would you eliminate immediately? You can eliminate foreign affairs right away because it doesn't match judicial affairs. Judicial, justice, agriculture, and interior are the main keywords you have left. You can cross out all the recurrences of the word department to help simplify and eliminate some of the extra words. Once you've done this, it's easy to find the correct answer, which is A. Here's a biology question. Can you decipher the correct answer? Okay, here's a hint. Eliminate A and D right away because they make absolute statements, the kind that don't allow for exceptions to the rule and the ones that we usually want to avoid. Now use logic. We can eliminate B because if they only live where man has never been, then how could they have any biological significance? If you chose C, great. Okay, one more. What are the absolutes? They're only, never, and always. In this case, D is the correct answer because it's the middle of the road statement and makes the most sense. Just a final note about common test-taking errors. Direction errors occur when you skip the directions or misunderstand them. Don't be afraid to ask questions about directions that don't make sense to you or that are confusing. Most careless errors can be caught by reviewing the test after you finish, like a sloppily written 5 that looks like a 2, or putting the answer to number 6 in the spot for number 7 on your answer sheet. Concept errors occur when you don't have a good grasp on the underlying principles. When this happens, make sure you go back to your textbook or notes and understand it so you don't make the same mistake on the next test. Application errors are mistakes that you make when you know the concept but don't apply it correctly to the problem. Practicing using the concepts while preparing for the test will help you avoid this. Procedure errors could be not completing problems to their final step, changing answers from correct to incorrect, getting stuck or spending too much time on one question, miscopying answers from scratch paper to answer sheet, leaving answers blank, or not following the strategies recommended in this presentation. Finally, study errors are mistakes that occur when you study the wrong material or don't spend enough time learning the pertinent concepts. Take advantage of learning from your mistakes on one test to do better on the next. Don't be a victim of one of these types of test-taking errors. I hope you found this presentation helpful. There are lots more great study tips available in the rack in the Learning Center, so take advantage of that and the other services we offer. This is how you can take charge of your education to be the best student you can possibly be and to ace not only your next test, but all the rest too.